thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We are eager to get into a deep conversation about teaching transitional skills this afternoon. We're going to give everyone a few more moments to get logged in here. Just a quick introduction of myself. My name is Meredith Campbell. I am the Senior Partnership Director of ExQ, and I'm going to be facilitating the conversation today. We're going to move through an educator's guide to strengthening executive function and empowering struggling kids. I'll give everyone just another moment here to get on. Please feel free to enter in the chat box where you're joining us from. We're excited to have you here today. Looks like we have people from all over tuning in, so thank you for your time. Feel free also, as we go through, to put your questions in the chat box for us, and we will try to get to those. Again, my name is Meredith Campbell. I'm the Senior Executive Partnership Director for ExQ, and we're going to go ahead and dive in here. We want to be respectful of everyone's time. As I said, will be your host today. We're going to be teaching transition skills, Educator's Guide to Strengthening Executive Function and Empowering Struggling Kids. And joining me today, I'm going to skip right over that, is Sucheta Kamath. She is the founder, creator, and CEO of ExQ. Sucheta is an award-winning speech-language pathologist, a TEDx speaker, and she's an entrepreneur whose patented software curriculum, ExQ, is innovating personalized learning in the ed tech space. Sucheta is a much sought-after educational thought leader and a nationally recognized expert on executive function and executive function training in both children and adults. She also hosts a podcast called Full Prefrontal, Exposing the Mysteries of Executive Function. And as the host of this podcast, she has interviewed more than 125 neuroscientists, researchers, educational leaders, journalists, and other industry experts on the topic of learning how to learn. Sucheta is board certified in neurogenic communication disorders, and she holds 2 master's degrees in speech language pathology and linguistics, and several other specialty certifications. And Sucheta, we are so happy to have you with us today and hear what you have to share with us.
Thank you so much, Meredith. Great to be with you and can't wait to banter.
Yes. So diving right in, today's agenda, the first thing we're going to do is discuss the nature of the pandemic-related learning loss and its impact on students, specifically students of color. We're going to review the relationship between foundational executive function skills and learning how to learn as related to motivation, self-regulation, adaptive flexibility, and everyday problem solving. And then finally, we'll move into learning some ways to deliver executive function as a foundational curriculum. Again, thank you everyone for joining us. Feel free to enter your questions or comments in the chat box, and we will try to get through them. So as we all know, this has been a particularly challenging year, and especially for our students and our schools. Sucheta, can you share with us some of the learning and teaching challenges that have been uncovered or exacerbated by the pandemic?
Happy to, and welcome everyone. And thank you, Meredith, for such an amazing question and a great introduction. Your expertise and hands-on experience has been a great insight for me, and I get to share this with you and everyone on this webinar. So let's start a little bit about the profile of the learning loss. McKinsey and the company's report came out in December of 2020 that really kind of summarized this really well, which says that while all students are suffering, those who came into the pandemic with the fewest academic opportunities are on track to exit with the greatest learning loss. And that is a profound summary of the impact. So what do we know from pre-pandemic? That students who actually were likely to be behind were the students with 2 particular subgroups. One is the low socioeconomic group, and second is actually the students with learning disabilities. And so that is, and the learning loss, another study that came out, which showed that learning loss in reading was not actually that evident yet, but in math, it was definitely behind. And the interesting data there was that students who took this study or participated through the MAP test, we found out that out of 5.2 2 million students who participated last year, pre-COVID, only 4 point, no, I'm still on the first slide, Meredith, sorry. But the students who participated in the survey were 4.8, and the remaining students who did not participate were mainly those students who could not actually access the education through technology and internet. So going to this slide that you are showing now, the setback for high-risk learners is amplified, and it's amplified in two specific ways: that the in-class instruction is absent in many school districts, and particularly those who are experiencing or that subgroup of schools and students are from low socioeconomic strata. And second is that without appropriate technology at home and the environment where parents may be the first responders and having multiple jobs, these students are not getting the adequate guidance and direction as they pursue their education. Next slide, please. So the impact, another interesting thing that, we are in a culture where we don't really celebrate and appreciate educators for what they're worth. And if we judge, the way we judge somebody's value is how we compensate for their skills and their capacity and the impact they make. And educators are, in my opinion, and you agree with me, Meredith, we have talked a lot about this, are not valued for what they do for the entire generation that's coming up. And what is so disheartening probably for the educators, that two factors, that the hours of time the educators are putting in and the effort they're putting in, there is substantially more, it's more than pre-pandemic times, which I don't even know how that is possible. But second thing is, in spite of that, the students are receiving less than what they were getting pre-pandemic. So this probably is blowing people's mind. And this just came out. It was the RAND Corporation report that came out in 2020. So I really feel for our educators, because it's like it's a double whammy. So nobody can accuse me I'm not doing my job, but I'm still not able to make the impact that I desire. Next slide, please. And this is another very interesting report that just came out recently, which was the survey of the National Association of Elementary School Principals. And what that showed was also quite telling story, which is the burden that the leadership is feeling, which I'm sure many of you are leaders in the audience here. But 82% of the participants, and the participants were 860 principals in the elementary schools, 82% of them reported that pandemic hurt the students' attendance and has caused students go missing. So these are the students that educators are even knocking on the doors. They're actually trying to find out their addresses. But because of this job loss and the housing loss and homelessness, there's an incredible cascading impact. The second thing is only 8% of participants reported that they have planned to set aside significant sums of money to do something about this learning loss. And the last was 70% reported to not have school-based mental health professionals to adequately serve the needs of the students. So as you can see, I hate to end here with a grim picture, but I really want to acknowledge that this is real, and everybody that is describing the pain and agony is real.
Well, and it's so true, Sucheta, the conversations that I'm having with everyone from administrators to teachers to parents emphasizes everything you just said. Teachers are absolutely exhausted. Many of them are having to teach both face-to-face and hybrid virtual learning at the same time. So they're trying to reach students as many different ways as they can. They're also trying to accommodate meeting with parents to help them around parents' work schedules. Parents are frustrated because they feel like their kids aren't getting what they need over a screen such as this. And then when I talk to administrators, they are tasked with trying to find a way to make this better, to better serve their students, get them engaged, but yet don't have time or money to remedy the problem. So it really is a triple-edged sword, if that's even possible. It's quite a challenging way to have to look at all of this. And the statistics that you shared are just eye-opening. Administrators and district leaders really are searching for solutions. Teachers are doing their best to remedy them. Some are looking to executive function as an answer, but many people aren't really familiar with the science of executive function or its impact on student learning outcomes. So can you share with us the best way to define executive function and how it contributes to academic and non-academic proficiency?
Thank you. I thought you would never ask. This is my wheelhouse. And just like Holly here in the chat mentioned that this seems to be an area of many students seem to struggle. And Holly, you're spot on. Executive function is a set of mental skills used to manage our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors so that we can plan, organize, and execute actions to achieve goals. The one important caveat there is goals set by self and goals achieved by self, and goals then remedied by self. So one of the things that I like to remind our parents and educators that if we are telling kids what the goals are, then that's a semi-executive function accomplishment because your executive function skills are going. So how do we transfer this baton from a parent or a teacher or educator to the child requires executive function approach to learning. And EF is the skill set that enables us to get things done. Get them done timely and effectively. So the next thing to think about, thank you, Meredith, is executive function directly correlated to the role of prefrontal cortex and the frontal lobes. So we have two of them, and they take full 25 years of age to fully mature. However, the predicament for us as educators is we are demanding executive function engagement, or that is dependent on the maturation of the prefrontal cortex or the frontal lobes, but it's not going to be there at age 18. We're expecting a kid to drive and take good decisions and not be on the cell phone when the brain itself is not capable. So one of the things that I wanted to these are my favorite set of skills that don't get talked about in the context of executive function, which is impulse control, long-term planning, gratification postponement. So really taking it one for the team. And who is that member of the team? Your future self. So kind of deciding to not eat that chocolate cake for the team of future self, which wants to lose weight and be in the sister's wedding, that kind of impulse control and delaying gratification. The next is future simulation. Huge part of planning and organization requires you to conceptualize and visualize and like playing a movie in your head to see this future that you want to. So if I want to wake up early, like 5 a.m., which I'm trying to do right now, I need to really imagine myself going to bed at 8 tonight. That's too early, maybe 9:30 or 10 o'clock. But that imagination of simulating the future is the role of frontal lobes. But we don't teach that in schools. And lastly is emotional regulation, which again is so interesting to me because we address it once the failures of these skills happen. Because we have lot of other things to teach. So next slide, please. And I love Robert Sapolsky's words, who says the frontal lobes make you do the harder thing when that's the right thing to do. So let's go to the next slide. And here's what I want to show. What is the right thing that kids are asked to do? And are they doing it? And when they don't do it, do we say that they are slipping, or we accuse them of not having high moral standards, personal standards? But here's the thing. So executive function and doing the harder thing is this way. Stay focused when task is boring. Very hard thing to do. Control your frustrations when you're challenged. Very hard thing to do. Switch gears when facing obstacles. Hey, this is not working. Let me try this. That's another hard thing to do, activated by frontal lobes. Seek and accept feedback. Now, tell me, how good does it feel to get negative feedback that, sorry, you failed? No, but entire premise of learning requires you to take feedback graciously and elegantly and say, sure, take away more points from me and give me more feedback. No, that students may not have a relationship with their errors as, please teach me what I can learn from my mistakes. The last two things is becoming self-aware and advocate for yourself. So saying that, hey, I don't understand what you're saying. Or saying, hey, I don't know where the website is that you're asking me to go and look for homework. And last thing is maintain integrity under stress and pressure. That is all made possible by these amazing two lobes called frontal lobes. Next one, please.
And I would think too, even what you said about accepting feedback, how it's difficult to accept it, the better our executive function skills are, the better we are also at our approach to giving that feedback. So it's not just
Today.
for students, it carries on through teachers to adults and all aspects of our life as well.
I love that. And Meredith, to complement that point, the second part of that feedback is we are asking students to do what? Project-based learning. We are asking them to collaborate, and they are required to blog post or share comments or edit other person's work as if the teacher is editing. And that requires a perspective shift. And that's also very hard because when doing the right thing, when the right thing is hard, is really what you need to master. So this is a graphic that I love. I have created this the concept of whenever I approach educators about teaching executive function, one of the things they feel extremely overwhelmed by the bandwidth of the curriculum that they have to cover. And they say, my plate is full. So I always like to tell them the plate itself needs strengthening. We have duct taped it. Let's replace the plate with something stronger, because that plate is hosting Latin, English, music, art, and that strength of the plate is going to determine the load you can carry. Absolutely. So I like to say that it's the subject agnostic skills that act as a wind beneath the wings. Next one, please. So finally, as a couple of things to think about, that we all want our students to become self-sufficient. And executive function is the invisible driver that can get them there. It will empower the young generation, young individuals to have the agency, have the control, have the ability to activate their motivations so that they can learn and manage their learning. Next one, please. So the flip side of this is, of course, weak executive functions diminish the learner's capacity to fulfill his or her own potential. Now, this is really a common factor. Having done this for 20 years, having done professional development for educators, I always like to describe the hardest student to teach. And the common description, Meredith, is the one that has so much potential. If he only understood himself, or only understood why I care so much about him and his ability to succeed, only he invested his time and effort in himself. So that's the biggest missing link, is executive function.
Thank you for that explanation. And having been a classroom teacher myself for more than 13 years, that still resonates with me. And those challenging students, the ones that are the most difficult to work with, are the ones that stay with you the most, that you continue to think about and wonder how they're doing. And so many of them need those type skills that you were just explaining. Now, the connection between executive function and learning engagement and outcomes is very evident from everything that you've shared with us. And these skills are really important for all teachers, yes, all students is what I meant to say, though, in order for them to be successful in school and beyond. Why is addressing executive function an equity issue with our students?
Well, thank you for asking that question, Meredith. That really is a profound concern of mine. And you and I share such vision for our students having opportunity for education, but opportunity to make a difference. And everything I'm reading, understanding, and have researched tells me that it's not every equity gap is an opportunity gap. And so what is that opportunity gap? Opportunity to develop self intentionally, specifically, and in a personalized way. So I want to kind of set the stage with this. Is one of the researchers who tracked, this is Moffitt and her colleagues tracked children, 1,000 children, more than 1,000 children over 32 years. And this is one of the studies where more than 97% participants stayed in the study, which kind of doesn't happen that often. But what they found is that you can see this arrow, Meredith, that the low self-control versus high self-control. That was a single determining factor for socioeconomic status and self-control. So if you control for all of the factors, those who were actually demonstrated greater self-control were able to then pursue jobs that paid them well, that allowed them to uplift themselves, or allowed them to not get in trouble with the law. So these are the things that they saw: higher high school graduation rate, less incidence of teen pregnancies, better jobs, higher incomes, better health, stronger relationships, which is again marital harmony, and greater compliance with rules, regulations, and medical treatment. And finally, finally fewer run-ins with the law. The reason I say that is if we want, as a society, that we care, that we elevate ourselves or elevate everybody who's struggling, then the ticket seems to be self-control. And self-control is the foundational, which I'll show you in a minute, but foundational executive function. So why not teach that so that everybody has an opportunity for self-regulation?
Well, and this slide reiterates that it's not just for the four walls of the classroom, that this is life learning to help be successful throughout all stages of life.
Absolutely. And the second factor that I think we cannot ignore, and particularly the trauma and resiliency work that everybody is now interested in, and social emotional learning activation that I'm seeing in schools, which makes me so happy. Again, for more than 20 years, I've been doing this, and this was considered a therapeutic way rather than intervention needed because need was there. And now we are shifting our mindset and say the intervention it's not an intervention, it's a way of being. And I love that approach. So sustained stress, relatively short-term stress, and everything in between. That's what scientists are saying. Scientists who study stress are saying stress impairs the functions of the prefrontal cortex. And remember all the delaying gratification, future simulation, emotional regulation. Because of the delay in the maturation of the prefrontal system, all the development of all these skills is delayed. Now, good news is that it's not absent or present. It's a trajectory of development. And this development hinges upon or is judged by the peers. So if you have a class of 20 and then 3 kids are falling behind, then guess what are we going to say? You are failing. You are in trouble. Because the frontal lobe development of the rest is happening at a pace that's adequate to meet the demands. But the second component I want to just highlight is, as educators, we are putting a lot of burden on learning. And so the learning is way beyond the chronological developing brain. So we are putting forth executive function demands that are not matched by chronological age. Next slide, please. So the research also talks about poverty, chronic stress, and executive function to be interlinked. What it's saying that those who experience chronic life stress also show reduced performance in the cognitive control area, which is what we saw earlier as well. But scarcity of resources, this is my favorite findings from the research, makes individuals hyper-focused on here and now. And that is a profound concern that all educators are describing. They're saying, I can't get my kid to think about AP classes in 12th grade or college readiness. You know, I'm talking about freshman orientation, and the kid is so interested in the girl sitting next to him. He's really not concerned about his AP qualifier or any such thing. So that future forward thinking is completely aborted if resources, and those resources can be, by the way, it can be food, scarcity, it can be emotional scarcity, and it can be, of course, any type of distress in interpersonal relationship. Next one, please. So just to tie in that plate analogy that I was saying earlier. So on that same plate, now we are not doing just subjects, but we are doing multifaceted goal management. So those who are interested, all educators I know, they are really concerned about reach before teach. Maslow's hierarchy of needs not being met, you can't really go to Bloom's hierarchy of development. So you are going to find a learner to be underprepared. If the gap in expectation from home versus school widens, the performance gap widens. And then there's also that tiny subgroup of gifted with or without social economic disadvantages. They have never needed to manage their learning because their intellect carries them. And then what happens? You ask them to show work, they can't. You ask them to turn in things. So these are the kids who do amazing on tests, but they have zeros on their homework. And then the GPA is low. So you're like really intrigued. Why are you not doing daily follow through? You're flying in French or doing fantastic in science, but you're bombing math. So that kind of discrepancy begins to show. And the last thing in the next slide, I want to show that executive function is an equity issue because now, you know, this 20 years when I started, this data kind of assessment was not available. It's the last 12 years people are deeply interested in interconnecting neuroscience with education in a way that they're studying students' behaviors, academic behaviors to their brain functioning. And we are seeing that the study that, there were 25 studies that were evaluated that involved children from age 2 to 18. They found that low SES and poor executive function performance was directly correlated. So that now I think is a clear way. If you want to do something, do this, teach executive function to our children. Next one, please. Oh,
absolutely. Yes. Thank you for that insight. As we begin to realize the importance of executive function and the role that it plays for all students, how can we understand the relationship between these skills and transitions, and why are transitions so challenging for our learners?
So interestingly, I love this. It seems to be a deep concern, but let's kind of define transition. So transitions, they require some cognitive and affective skills. Affective means emotional competence, which is disengaging and then re-engaging. So let's say I'm transitioning. I just was yapping with a friend of mine before getting on the webinar. I needed to clear my head and I needed to make sure the slides work. Always, it's a stressful thing to make something go live, as all of you may know. So disengage from fun brain and engage into a active, deep thinking brain. So that's a transition. The second level of transition is flexibility and adapting in a flexible way and bring upon change in oneself intentionally. And the next one is tempering emotional responses through these changes. So I am asked to join a meeting where I feel I shouldn't be there. And that requires me to have amazing face and say, oh, I love this meeting, when inside I'm dying a little bit. No, I'm just kidding. We all have been in these places where we have been asked to do things that you rather not, or you brought something with great interest and enthusiasm and you were cut short. So many ways our emotions are dysregulated because of the interruptions that are brought in. And that requires transition. And in this slide, as you can see, the transition can be big, small or very big. So let's take a simple transition. A kid who comes running from the playground into the library, not even a classroom, they have to now use an inside voice. How many, second graders are able to master that? And that definitely is a trouble because they're still speaking loudly and shouting. So toning that down is a transition.
My husband still has issues with that.
And why your husband? I have a problem. When I was a teenager, when I would come from school and start excitedly speak, my father used to always do this. So I had such a loud voice, I didn't even realize that. But another interesting transition is, let's say a child who loves to swim. Now, suddenly mom and dad recognize the love for swimming and they put them in swim meets. Now, the same child, the transition is, I want to do this for me volitionally. Don't drag me into anything. And now that kid has to transition and perform swimming with great interest. And that can be really hard. But the last transition I want to talk about is milestone transition. So elementary to middle school, middle school to high school. So changed expectations and transitioning to adapt skills to meet the expectations is next level of transition. So next one, please. So it's really not fair to talk about transitions in such an obscure way. So I kind of conceptualize transitions in 3 tiers of transitions. So when I do professional development, I talk about teaching skill set that are appropriate for each tier. So the foundational executive functions are different than intermediate level of executive function proficiency and the advanced level of executive function proficiency. So let me quickly walk you guys through that. Next slide, please. So foundational skills are typically described in neuroscience: response inhibition, working memory, task initiation, situational anticipation, and emotional control. So this is the useful skills. So in elementary, when the foundational skills are not at par, guess what we see? A child who's, having a breakdown, a meltdown, a child who bites other child, or child who's refusing to sit in a circle, a child who's laying down on the floor. So inability to, or child who says, pick me, incessantly keeps raising their hand, even though it's amazing, but inappropriate. So that's where the foundational skills in elementary typically lead to lots of reprimands and then sent to the principals. And those are the infractions that these kids gather. Now talk about intermediate, which I just explained: sustained effort, organizing your materials, organizing your time, task, and organizing your thoughts, which is much more invisible. Then planning, perspective memory, which is how do I remind myself to remember, goal management, and study skills. If you don't have intermediate executive function skills, guess what happens? You are the kid who gets zeros on homework. You're the kid who doesn't know project is due. You're the kid whose school gave a planner, the teacher gave a planner, the counselor asked you to write in the planner. You even set up a system to sign off the planner after I see you write the homework. And then that's the kid who never takes that skill and makes it his own, because those skills are not emerging at the level where it becomes their own. And the last, the advanced skills, which are essential for transitions, are these amazing future forecasting. What am I about? What am I doing? Where am I going? What college would I like? What career would I like? Can I get a second job and manage my school because my parents also are struggling? Like, that understanding requires a lot of advanced executive function, metacognition, awareness, and self-devised strategic thinking. Can I change myself to yield better results for myself? And so, next slide, please. So one of the things that I often get asked, Meredith, that what was my impetus, motivation to develop ExQ? So I wanted to teach these skills in a very systematic way and in an organized way to every child. So one of the ways we have organized in ExQ, the foundational skills are met by addressing focus, working memory, and mental flexibility at an experiential level, at a metacognitive level, and at an error level. And the second is intermediate level, which is organization planning, problem solving, and prospective memory. How do I remind myself to remember to remember? How do I rehearse? There are three kinds of rehearsals. What? There's a verbal rehearsal, mental rehearsal, and a visual rehearsal. Students don't know this, so we are teaching it. And the last is the advanced executive function, which is metacognition. So we teach that deliberately, how to become more aware and how to become more strategic thinker. So the goal is, because they're subject agnostic skills, they are taught without the aid of the subject. Next one, please.
Well, and I think a key point to remember here too, at least all my years in the classroom, that kids who don't have these skills, not only does it result in a 0 in the grade book, but they start to question their own ability. They start to lose interest. They start to think, well, I can't do this, so I might as well not even try. And then they start shutting down. And then it just makes a downward cycle. So it's really, really imperative that we start to teach these skills explicitly so that we prevent the kids from getting into that downward spiral. Instead, address the issue at the bottom level and bring them up.
I love that. I think that's a really important point that you make, Meredith. And that's why let's talk about now successful transitions. They are marked by seamless adaptability. Robin, thank you for that question. Are they directly correlated to age? So these are very complex and overlapping skills. So I don't want to make it sound they're very concrete, elementary, boom, phase 1 done. It doesn't work like that. But you can pretty much think about executive function as demand-based. So what kind of demand do we have of our students? And are they meeting the demands? And the reasons they're not meeting the demands is because they may be stuck in one of those phases of development. So you could have multiple phases that you're stuck. I mean, how many of you know an impulsive colleague who blurts out something when they shouldn't? I just told you, don't tell everybody. That is an impulse control failure, which is the foundational executive function failure. But it's not that it's a present or absent. I like to think about it as a car driving on the highway, and less the gas, less miles you're going to accomplish. So the car is not broken down, but it's going to come to stop because it's exhausted its resources. So we are likely to do better in the morning. I'm making this up. After your cup of coffee, but you're going to decline in your executive function proficiency. So you're doing a very complex project. At the end of the night, you're going to have a bummer city, experience a little bit. So the thing I want to kind of end here is the resilience. If you're talking about resilience, let's not leave executive function from the equation. I see incredible focus on SEL, social emotional development, and these are two sides of the same coin. So executive function are cognitive and affective regulation, and SEL is social emotional and affective regulation. So it's one without the other is incomplete story.
Yes, absolutely. So if we can strengthen these skills that we're talking about, both sides of the coin, to help us better understand and navigate transitions, we'll be better preparing our students for what comes next in their life. So important as students begin to develop their self-efficacy. Is there research that supports the link between executive function training and gaining independence?
Yes, so Learning Policy Institute came out with this smashing report, and it talks about very clearly and explicitly how how social emotional learning skills and executive function, if addressed, can show exponential gains. And there are some things that they recommend. You can do through formal education. You can do consistent family routines and qualified caregiving. And third is explicit opportunity to practice and exercise. So there's a very important element of exercise that's why my specialty is, which I have spent 20 years in exercising the brain to develop these skills. So let's not forget that. Next slide, please. And this is an interesting research that Research ILD has shared, which is they actually saw that students whose teachers integrated executive function strategies into the curriculum improved their performance improved over 6 months versus those students whose teachers followed usual school curriculum. So this kind of understanding that actual EF-centric strategies can elevate student performance is very valuable, because this is one thing I want to kind of assure our educational leaders on this call, that this is not really saying, let's add something more to the teachers. It's saying, let's complement teachers' effort in a different way so that they can continue to be effective. So just, and you were in special ed, I was in special ed. What do we know? If we literally brought in special ed techniques, a lot of these can really help average student.
Yes.
And so let's kind of not forget that side as well. So there are two ways to help students master transitions, in my opinion. And I recommend that train the teachers to train the students. So this is a traditional PD-based, professional development-based, and absolutely valuable, but may not be adequate. So what is happening is individual teachers' competence, the school-wide culture of executive function, and then ability to get reciprocity from the students are variables that really make the teacher's ability to implement executive function-centric strategies. So let's not focus just on that. The second component is train the students directly. And the training that I'm talking about is called experiential learning. So that's what I recommend, that let's not forget that. Next one.
Yeah, so taking into consideration, really, teachers need to understand executive function to be able to help teach these skills directly and explicitly so that the students are getting that directly. Can you share with us some of the effective strategies that are out there to be used?
Great. Thank you, Meredith. So one thing I think, first of all, I would like to start by educate the educators about neuroscience and executive function. And here's what I don't want to see happen. Let's not put the burden on the teacher to go read a book. That is not going to be enough. Because what is most important is the teacher is kind of part of a very large, bigger picture or gestalt. So teachers making changes in her approach needs to be a kind of trickling down into entire that students being in the school. So here are some ideas, like offer professional development focused on executive function and the science of self-efficacy. This is a little bit different. I want to kind of point out that in education, the research often focuses on self-efficacy. Do I know who I am as a student? Do I know what works for me? And in neuroscience, it says, do you know your brain, and do you know what your brain knows about you? Which is, there are some reasons you may not know a few things about you. So they're same, but the language may be different. But self-efficacy should be at the heart of this. Second is, based on the professional development, deploy a year-long initiative to assess and refine EF implementation. And the slide that you have is you can consider me as a curator of information. So I have curated. It's like going to the museum, and instead of wandering through the entire museum getting bored, well, how about looking at Picasso's curated special exhibit? So it's going to be Picasso, but it's going to be for 1900 to 1925. Now you can focus your attention a little bit better. So I have a podcast called Full Prefrontal, Exposing the Mysteries of Executive Function. It is very, very specific for educators and those who are in the business of helping people. So you can use that as a resource. And I do takeaways. We have resources in the show notes. And so you can follow that as a curriculum, just as an example. You do not need to do that. I'm not endorsing anything, and I'm not getting anything in return. Second, the next thing is create case studies to link behaviors to executive function using EF vocabulary. So like I said, in ExQ, we have 7 areas that we talk about. What is focus? What's mental flexibility? Students need to know the definition of these ideas, and then they need to have a way to tackle at a strategic level. Next is connect EF transition failure to school and district-wide infractions. So if you're concerned with too many high school dropouts or not enough graduation, and if you're concerned with punishment or infractions, then you need to really consider EF as a way to remediate that. So this is a great example. The slide you have, Meredith, is actually instead of labeling children as lazy, unmotivated, not working to their potential, oppositional, messy, tardy, these are behavioral markers. It implies that you are not good enough. Now, if you replace lazy with failure to task initiate, now you are pointing out that brain is not showing maturation to engage in a specific skill that allows completion of tasks. Boom, the whole language changes. Now you're removing the label and you're saying, I understand your brain better. And I have some ways to help your brain help you, but you can help your brain as well. So I like this idea of like changing messy to flexibility, lacking work ethic, saying this child is not able to persist when there's a goal to be attained. Now, I'm not talking about the lip service or kindness, but this is a way of thinking. So next slide, please. I just quickly want to show you all, those who are interested, in ExQ, we offer Teacher Portal, a year-long self-directed professional development experience for all teachers. And one of the things is it's MOOC style. That means you can actually, it's a self-paced, you set the pace and there's no grades to be received, but everything is in tandem with the learning that the students are doing. And teachers are also given opportunity to train their own executive function skills using ExQ if they want. And finally, there are lesson plans that are created that teachers can directly embed into their classrooms.
Excuse me, that is great information to share. I also wanted to just point out that all of the resources that you mentioned, the podcast and the different papers and books and things, at the end of this presentation, I'm going to show our our website address, and a lot of those can be accessed directly through our website. So y'all please be sure to check those out. There's a lot of wonderful resources on there, no cost to you, just as an educational tool for you to use at your own convenience.
So the question?
Strategy 2.
Yes, so let's go through strategy 2. So I think there's a lot of emphasis that teachers are talking about organizing teaching. And I see one of the overcorrections that often happens is teachers become extremely organized. Their classrooms are impeccably organized. They create systems, they have order, they have individual websites. They even are very specific in laying out the details. I just want to pause and say, if you are organizing, then your executive functions go into it. If the student organizes, the student's executive functions go in it. So as you organize teaching in a way that creates pro-executive function classrooms, there are a few things need to be there. Translate implicit expectations into explicit, and take away the explicit instructions and quiz students about the implicit. If you don't do the second phase of it, it's not executive function training. Second thing is use visual calendar and teach EF concepts such as long-term future planning and meeting deadlines, but the visual calendar should have the steps that go into the calendar. I have rarely seen teachers having, and of course this is in-person meeting, of course, that having a large big picture calendar that the teachers teach the students to fill in, and the struggling students become the conduit of putting a little thumbtack in a cue card saying that a deadline is due. So that experience of doing is really important. The last suggestion here is grade process knowledge along with the content knowledge. Very important. What does that mean? We are giving tests and we are testing knowledge, but are we testing process? So I encourage, and this has been a very tough invitation, but I invite teachers to consider giving one test, and second test, you give erroneously answered test. So the student's job is check the test. and they give the grade to whoever, the invisible student. And that ability to think like a teacher is a critical element of building executive function. And last is help students document the improvements in self-efficacy in an executive function journal. So the journal is directly connected to organizational failures, process-specific failures, and what have I done over time. Next, please. So what happens in ExQ? We've done this in this way. ExQ offers written and video journaling process where students reflect on their understanding of school expectations and effective ways to improve work habits. And what we are providing the educators is the students actually go through the experience themselves, but the teachers have access to their journaling, whether it's a in-person video journaling or in written journaling. And teachers can then use this content to guide their executive function teaching in the classroom. Second thing is ExQ also has built-in mechanism to individualize and personalize strategies for each student. So you can actually see the students saying, I already use this strategy and I would like to use this strategy. Now the teacher actually can use this self-efficacy assessment by the student and say, can I have a word with you, Meredith? You're saying you actually put all your papers that I give you in the binder. Can you show me? Now, boom, Meredith has to like either show or kind of answer why she said she actually does it. And now this is not calling out the student, but it is kind of saying, hey, you are assessing your efficacy this way, but that needs to match with your actual execution.
Well, and that's such a powerful tool for a teacher because like you said, it's not that they're trying to call the student out. Sometimes that needs to be the case, but oftentimes the student really does think that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, and they need that explicit guidance and direction to break it down into even more succinct steps for them to follow. They think that they have a plan, but they're not following through because they don't have the skills to be able to do it. And when a teacher can understand that, she can better devise her one-on-one conferencing, her strategies that she wants to use, and further differentiate the learning for that student. So that's a great tool that's included there. What's another strategy for us, Sucheta?
Yeah, so the next strategy is teach and help build students' executive function profiles. So the other thing I really want to kind of talk about is you can't talk about building self-sufficiency without a baseline on self-sufficiency. Like it's like my husband saying you need to transfer the clothes from washer to dryer and then fold it. Well, the self-efficacy would be for me to flat out deny that I don't do it, and then that's it. There's no progress. This is sorry to expose our private matter, but what I'm saying is efficacy is really, do I even have an understanding of what I'm expected to do? And do I know whether I'm meeting it or not? Or do I have this abstract idea that I don't do it or I'm bad at it? So identify strengths and challenges by linking behaviors and learning to the EF profile. So what I do see is in student-led conferences, you're describing behaviors, but behaviors, remember, it goes back to this problem that behaviors can really lead to we then saying that you are behaving badly. So instead, we need to really translate behavior to learning failure, but then learning failure to brain function maturation. So we need to say, hey, it looks like your remember skills are still not mature enough to help you to remember your assignment. So I would like you to change it this way. So it's a really, really important idea. And next is anchor teaching in growth mindset to build resilience. So one of the things that teachers may need to think about is how does growth mindset develop, right? It's that belief that skills can improve, behaviors can change, and competency can be elevated. So, and then help students create goals and post common useful learning strategies for all. And as students, again, grade student strategy use. This is a really important executive function proficiency building skill. And to talk about this slide, in ExQ, what we do is using a specialized assessment protocol. ExQ identifies executive function profile for every student. So no single student receives an assessment. This is so powerful. Don't we do MAP skills for all? So we should be doing executive functions assessment for all. So, and then the students learn about their brain, science of learning, and how they can inculcate growth mindset through exercise-based and lecture-based learning. But most importantly, this profile is available for every student, and the educators have a global trend of what profile seems to be emerging amongst all the students. So this is an example. As you can see, the brain that we are showing with the strength pointed out and the weakness pointed out. And lastly, we actually train the students to use the EF vocabulary. So they understand and will be able to lead their brain by saying, I am struggling with focus. My working memory is not working, allowing me to follow through with instructions when they're 3-step. That ability is called self-advocacy, by the way. Next one. And quickly, yes, yeah, oh, okay, I see that your question was answered, Farlane, so that's great. Yes, we will be making this available. So yeah, next strategy is teach self-monitoring skills to students. So self-monitoring is literally, imagine, I like to give this visual image that I am driving and then I have a chopper following me. And this chopper is keeping me safe. Like I'm imagining I'm the president of this country. But none of that is true. What I'm saying is this capacity to separate your executionary brain from the supervisory brain is maturation of the frontal lobes. So my ability to check me while I do is the self-monitoring system. And that self-monitoring system is subset of the metacognition. And so teach self-monitoring strategies by documenting executionary success. That means one of the strategies is to have a table with 3 kind of columns and saying, hey, who understands this concept well and can explain? Who feels, who understands but can't explain? And who needs help? So the students type in an active Google document and the students write their names or put thumbs up, thumbs down. And now teacher asks, hey, any volunteers who can explain this concept to these kids? So now you have this self-efficacy, the column 1, people who said, I can, not only I understand, but I can explain. Then when they begin to explain, the teacher can monitor or model. So this in ExQ, how we do it is we ask the students to monitor their work habits over a weekly basis through every lesson. And these are 10 habits that they regularly monitor and report. And then we provide that information to the educators to see if they see similar observations or not. But other thing we do is we also ask the students to link these work habits to their personal goals they have for school. And now the circle is full. And then in this, as you can see, one of the things we do in the exercise-based educational games that we have created, we pause and we ask the students to predict their performance accuracy. And we ask them to predict the level of difficulty. But then at the end, we ask them one more time. And then we find the gap between these kind of tentative prediction to full-on experience-based prediction. And if they get closer to the actual performance, we give them feedback that your self-awareness is improving.
Well, by pausing and asking for them to predict at various different times, it's intentional reflection. So often our kids, there's so much pressure to get it done, get it done, get it done, that they're rushing through and not paying attention to the process. And this makes them slow down and think about what they're doing and reflect on it to try to do better.
Yeah, and I think it's just such a constant process of building these invisible skills. And this is a totally hidden curriculum. And the more hidden the curriculum, less likely that the skills will emerge. That's why we have to be intentional. And one important key to intentionality is pausing. So the next strategy, this is the last strategy, teach executive function centered how to learn strategies directly and explicitly. So what the idea there is, again, that metacognition, which is my knowledge of me and my ability to check my performance and connect it to expectations, is a very integral part of self-directed learning. And we in ExQ, next one, please. How we do it is no game in ExQ are alike. The material is marked with challenges, novelty, and dissimilarity. This is a very important key of executive function development. Dissimilarity means no practice effect. That means I am not getting better where I can tune off my brain and say, I memorized it. If your work requires memorization, then you're not requiring executive function. If your work requires looking, scanning, and picking out salient details and organizing, that's executive function. And lastly, ExQ teaches task analysis, higher order reasoning, and problem solving through its virtual coach. And the coach actually prompts the students to transfer and generalize these skills outside. So as we end, and then Meredith, I'll hand it to you, but strengthening executive function unlocks the secrets to well-being. Because let's think about what's well-being. Well-being is feeling competent. Well-being is feeling satisfied. And well-being is feeling that I contributed to my community. Imagine that one or two students who are getting in trouble, they have this deep awareness that I am not meeting expectations. But those students who are like these swans, heavily working below the surface, but feeling that they're never adequate. All those kinds of students who are marginalized, there is a feeling that I am not able to unlock the secret to my success. And that causes incredible stress. So if we empower students with executive function, they actually can have agency over their learning.
And that's such a powerful thing for them to learn. And executive function training is designed for all students. As you've talked about throughout this conversation today, it does require a two-pronged approach with some teacher-led facilitation, as well as that really individualized student-centric curriculum for them to be able to see that impact. And going at it from the teacher approach and the self-paced approach within the curriculum really helps them build those skills repetitively. And the more they do it, the more they visit it, the stronger those skills are going to be, and the more successful they're going to be. So with that, we're getting short on time. I do want to let everyone know that if you are interested in ExQ and learning more about executive function, we are offering a pilot program to schools right now. On this last page here, Sucheta and my own contact information. Please feel free to email either one of us, give us a call, text us. We would love to connect with you, learn more about your school and your student needs. Feel free to reach out to us. You can also find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. I apologize if we were not able to get to the questions that were popping in. We will try to see if there is a way for us to visit those. Again, visit our website, give us a call, and we would love to connect with you all. Thank you so much for joining us, and hope you all have a great afternoon.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed, and yes, do reach out to us. Thank you very much. And do take the survey at the end and keep in touch. Have a wonderful afternoon. And thank you, Meredith, for amazing moderation.
Thank you, Sucheta.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Have fun.
Bye-bye.